In the early 1980s, a loud, raw form of music arrived in Minnesota.
It was fast, loud, obnoxious, beautiful.
I like music where someone's going to take the folding chair and smash it on my head.
Not everyone likes hardcore, and they don't like that fast, loud music. I love it because I am loud and I'm fast.
The kids that were my age, into it in the Twin Cities, you're talking 40, 50 people in a city of, 2 million.
And if you weren't hardcore, you are a poser, right? Fucking posers.
We're hardcore, and we would have these little kid pits, we're dancing, it was just, at the time, it was the most exciting thing on two wheels.
This is the story of Minnesota hardcore. Minnesota in the late 1960s. An explosion of teenagers forming bands. Garage rock, folk rock, psychedelic rock, nightclubs, dances, love-ins. It was a social scene. The Hullabaloo, the New City Opera House, the prison. If you were young and into loud rock, there was a scene for you. This was all disappearing by the early 1970s.
James Taylor on KQ92, 92 FM and 1440 AM.
God, I sure am glad that I found him.
Keeping things warm on KS95 FM with a hot new sound from the Little River Band. Take it easy.
I turned my radio off probably in 1970 when there was just a lot of junk on radio, especially in the Midwest.
It was, Ted Nugent, and it was Fleetwood Mac, and it was the Eagles and all that stuff. It was, KQRS playing the same thing that everybody else, and after a while you just say enough is enough.
And I'm in this halfway house, I'm listening to Steve Miller, the Eagles, Pablo Cruz, all that kind of stuff. And then in this halfway house, I meet these guys, and all of a sudden it's like all about punk rock. I had no idea what punk rock was at the time. I was always running from the cops.
This is punk rock, and its purpose, one observer says, is to promote violence, sex, and destruction in that order.
By the time I got into junior high school, it was like, started hearing about punk rock, but it was always somewhere else. It was like New York, it was London, and I try to remember what the first time I understood there was like punk here in town.
Introducing the Suicide Commandos playing Burn It Down.
The Commandos formed because we hated everything on the radio and we wanted to make rock and roll that we laughingly said was stripped down and shoved into high gear.
You're gonna die because you are so dumb. You don't like it.
They were a three-piece band that just was so fast and furious and so great and had so much energy.
They were the catalyst that started the first wave that started the second wave after that, so we really didn't have anything to compare it with at that point.
There was an explosion of bands. It went from maybe a half a dozen to a dozen. Pretty soon there's 50, 100 bands that want to play. I'm not necessarily a giant punk rock fan. I got stuck in with all that, but that's fine because what I do is a little extreme.
Talk about it. I want to talk about it. I just want to talk.
there was a meeting. It was Curtis A. and Suicide Commandos and a couple others, and they literally got together to say, look, where can we go to play original music? And they lucked into Jay's Longhorn, and that really is the birth of punk rock in Minneapolis.
When I was 17, we started hanging out at the Longhorn, and it was like, well, this is for me. Sign me up. I didn't think before that I had the musical chops or the ability to be in a band. And then I did.
I think it was 79 when I was in college in Eau Claire. Like, we drive to the Longhorn from Eau Claire because it's not far, and we were all like, man, punk rock's super cool. We want to be into punk rock. And we're like, we're going to move to Minneapolis because, like, that's a scene there. There's something really cool happening in Minneapolis.
The whole thing about playing punk rock in 1979 and going to the Longhorn and seeing the bands that were there, there were a lot of really good bands, and then there were a lot of us other bands that were just trying to figure it out and having fun.
Younger kids coming to the Longhorn were looking for something new, something raw.
The Suburbs were my favorite of all of them. That was what made me like punk rock. And then they kind of went into dance. They went dance.
I think I saw the last punk show that the Suburbs probably ever did. And then for like a week later, they had like bow ties on and like wanted to be from New York or something like that.
In the very early days in the Longhorn and the Suburbs and then sort of new wave and punk rock, the influence was coming from New York. And it was pretty obvious. I mean, that's where everything came from. And I loved that. That was awesome. But at the same time, there was this noise coming from the West Coast. And it didn't seem like very many people were into it or really giving it much credit.
The way I've heard it is hardcore pretty much started in Orange County in California with bands like The Middle Class, and Black Flag is probably the best known one.
That was like the new thing that was happening. Like, you know, there was punk rock, but then there's like, oh, now we have hardcore. We're distilling punk rock down into the barest, most minimal elements and speed it up at the same time.
And like literally it was a moment in time that parted paths with some of my best friends because they were just like, that's just retread bullshit. I want nothing to do with it. And I'm like, no way, this is totally, you know, this is new. This is like, how can you not get it? You know, it's just like one of those incredibly stupid fights you can only have when you're 17 that will last the rest of your life.
Hardcore describes a time that's less desirable to me than what I see as the beginnings of punk rock, because hardcore was something that was it was more derivative of the earlier style, and it didn't have the original excitement, or it was just trying to be as aggressive and mean as possible, which, you know, that can only go so far.
No, I won't believe that this is all. I'm not happy. I'm not free.
I didn't know that music could be like that. I had no idea. And it was just this great funnel of place where I could put my rage and actually have like a soundtrack.
I can't take it. Can't take no more, no more, no more, no more.
In 1980, the California band Black Flag played the Longhorn.
I was like stoked on that for sure. And they played on a Wednesday night, which was called Tiger Night, and it was free beer until 10 o'clock. So it's free to get in, free beer till 10, and then Black Flag's playing.
I can't take it. It won't work. No more, no more, no more, no more. It won't work.
Downtown Minneapolis was changing. The Longhorn became Zoogies. They moved away from harder edged bands.
First Avenue, 7th Street entry had opened up, and that was pretty much the beginning of hardcore music for Minneapolis.
Looking back on it now, I can tell you this is obvious, because a bunch of bands would come to me and nobody would book them. And I said, well, there's a surplus there, go with the flow. So my calendar started filling up with punk, hardcore, new wave, whatever. I didn't dwell so much into defining their music. They did that. And the critics did that, and the record store clerks did that. They're the ones who come up with the bins, hardcore music, speed metal.
I mean, you started to realize how hardcore punk was, like, you know, when like D.O.A. came to town, and then you're like, okay, these guys are like not from around here, and they seem a lot more, you know, tough.
When I went and saw D.O.A. featuring Joey Shithead at the entry, that's when hardcore starts in Minneapolis. And it was a big deal. Like, for some reason, maybe the record had showed up as Hardcore 81. Like, whoa, what's that mean? And people are slammed in. It was fairly violent. And at that time, Minneapolis was 7th Street entry, 7th and Hennepin was gnarly. It was high crime, especially when you're like 19, you don't know anything. And you know, if you had like a mohawk, forget about it. I didn't have a mohawk. I had a mohawk for a week, and I could not fucking take the amount of attention you got from a mohawk in 1981. I remember Joey Shithead, he stops and, you know, after one song just goes, "You're safer in here than you are out there." You know, and you get it right away, like, oh, right, we're in a gang. It's like a gang. And you went, yeah, I found my people.
The Huskers came along. Of course, I was friends with them because Bob was my student. I lived at 24th and Pillsbury, and Bob would get off. He'd taken the bus over from McAllister, and he had his big flying V case. And then we would, you know, I showed him stuff that he kind of sort of already knew. And after about 5 lessons, I said, "Bob, you're ready to go. Go form a band."